Hey there, Santi here. Today I'm talking with Riccardo, a programmer from Italy, super knowledgeable guy. We talk about the power of Tana, why it's changing the PKM world, and I really think you're gonna enjoy it. Now, if you're already convinced that Tana is the right app for you and you want to learn it the proper way, or if you have high hopes and this interview helps you understand the power of this amazing app, I highly recommend you check out my Tana course. Obviously, I'm biased because I made it and I've been putting tons of effort to make sure that I break down the fundamentals of this amazing app so that you can really understand it to develop the workflows that you've been dreaming of. So if that sounds interesting, do check out the link in the description. Now, also I wanted to let you know that this is part 1 out of 2. So, there's going to be part 2 coming out soon. By the time it's out, you might find it here or in the description. And in that second part, we dig deeper into like the future of Tana, slightly more advanced topics, which I really think you're going to enjoy. So stay tuned for that. But with that said, I hope you enjoy this part 1. And yeah, go for it. Enjoy it. Go ahead. Hey everyone, I'm here with Riccardo and very excited to do this very cool conversation about Tana. He's going to show us a bit of his workflow and yeah, it's going to be awesome. So Riccardo, thank you for being here. Can you just introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Santi. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Riccardo. I'm 22 years old. I come from Italy. I work as a software engineer at Sentry. That is a company in which we basically build error monitoring tools. And in my free time, I like to play around with productivity apps. I like to cook, travel, and in general, watch TV shows. So yeah, that's all about myself.
Very nice. Yeah. So like you are a programmer, right? So like what got you into programming? Like, being younger, what encouraged you to study computer science, right?
So yeah, I think I always loved sciences and I was always impressed by mathematicians and I always love also mathematics. And so I got into programming simply because I was looking through YouTube when I was, I think, 16 years old. And so I thought to myself, like, why don't I start to try and see if I like something that is completely new and out of my comfort zone? And then once I started doing it, I dropped after, I remember, 6 months because it was like too much complicated or convoluted for that. But after like 2 months, I was pretty determined to go back again. And from then on, I started really seriously to go into programming and work on many different things, ranging from web development, backend development, distributed systems, and more complicated topics. So that's basically my history with programming.
Nice. And now, like the company you're working in, like, can you talk a bit about like what kind of projects you work on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually I work for Sentry. Sentry is a unicorn startup from San Francisco. We basically build error monitoring and performance monitoring solutions for front-end and back-end. We have basically hundreds of SDKs supported on multiple platforms whose goal is to collect data in order to actually give you more insights on the issues you have related both to performance but also errors. And at Sentry, it's an open source company, so I can tell you basically mostly everything. My work is public, and what I do is, in this case, work on the backend and the distributed systems behind Sentry that basically handle all of this data. And actually, Sentry ingests billions of events per month, and so actually the scale is quite interesting to work with.
Nice, very cool. Like, what are your thoughts in general about like open source versus paid software? Let's talk more in the context of like PKM tools, so like productivity stuff. Like, what is your take on that?
So first of all, I think that open source right now, especially the quality is increasing quite a lot. And I think many people since like years thought that open source tools don't have enough like quality as compared to commercial tools, mainly because actually some of them have full-time people working on, whereas open source typically is made on a like voluntary basis. I think that from a software perspective, that is like actual libraries that we use as engineers, open source is the way to go for many different reasons. The most important being collaboration between different use cases that can arise from different developers. Whereas from a PKM or productivity point of view, I still think that it's not comparable. And the reason being that most of the times open source apps are made by teams that want to make like compatibility at their core. And for example, if we consider like Obsidian, they tend to actually, for example, use more common formats at the expense of having less advanced features. For example, I can say Markdown, which is used in Obsidian, is of course a flexible format, but is nowhere near as complex and like useful as, for example, formats used by Tana, in this case, JSON data stores, or a ROM, which is using data log behind the scenes. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting because like, there's like the two sides of people, and like obviously in Twitter, like people are just exploding comparing Tana to this stuff. And people have been asking me a lot, like, what is really the trade-off of, like letting go of files like Markdown, which I've been a huge advocate of just being able to own all of your data. But like you say, like you miss a lot of opportunities to use more advanced technologies, right? Like at the end of the day, Markdown has limitations. So like when it comes to owning your data, like how do you perceive Tana in that case that is in the cloud, and a lot of people seem to not like the idea to have their notes in the cloud, and myself included. Like in Notion, I wasn't a big fan of just having everything in the cloud, and I didn't really feel I could export that easily or back it up. With Tana, I feel it's a bit better, but I love to hear your opinion on that, on owning your data in Tana.
So yeah, I think that this topic is quite interesting. First of all, we need to describe two different things. One thing is actually being scared about the data not being secure, and the other thing is being scared, for example, about not, or like being in a locked-in effect on a certain platform. So regarding the privacy side, this of course can expose several issues, but in this case, the issues are mitigated if you use application with end-to-end encryption. In that case, it makes absolutely nonsense to be more scared of online versus offline, because in this case, data will be encrypted in transfer and at rest. So that's not a problem. Whereas, for example, if you consider other productivity applications which do not have encryption built in, that could cause a problem. But of course, if the application itself is designed by people that know how to build secure systems, and for example, the system is audited every year by experts, then of course you can be more sure that data is secure. Of course, everyone would say, I know that it's more secure if I keep it on my machine. That's fine. And this is from a privacy standpoint. When, on the other hand, we talk about actual safe security of data not being compromised in the sense that it's lost, for me, like if you don't have, for example, at home, a system with an advanced RAID, and so you have replicated storage drives, then it makes no sense to be more scared of data in the cloud than in your machine. It's way more likely that your machine will fail or you will spill coffee on it than actually one of the clusters of Google going down. We can say the same for AWS, Azure, Heroku, and so on.
Right.
So actually, yeah, that's my opinion. Honestly, for me, I prefer to have data in the cloud because I love the concept that data is not on my machine, but is whenever I want, wherever I want. That's for me very important. Indeed, if I would never ever use a note-taking app without synchronization. That's my take.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting because, like I've been a big part of like being an advocate for owning your data, because I feel it gives you this sense of peace of mind, and like, but the problem is that I always ended up myself using any sort of service to sync it to my other laptop or to my phone. So I still end up using something that compromises the privacy a bit, or that it relies on something to be able to sync it. So like that is the advantage of cloud storage. But I still struggle to understand like what makes some services like Tana better than, for instance, Notion, because I just feel like my data is safer in Tana than it is in Notion. But I wonder why that is. Like, do you feel like there's a big difference, or maybe it's just like me, just maybe like comparing things where there aren't any issues?
So first of all, I think that I don't have enough system knowledge of Tana to give you, like, for example, an explanation on that. What I know is the technologies they use. So Notion has a lot of custom infrastructure to run their product, whereas Tana, from what I know, bases a lot themselves on Firestore, also for synchronization, but I'm not 100% sure. So from a security standpoint, I wouldn't be able to tell which is safer or not, considering the fact that both use encrypted protocols. So data in transfer is actually encrypted. The issue is data encrypted at rest? And the answer is, I think that neither Notion or Tana do it. And the reason being that most of the times encryption, besides the additional level of complexity, creates also some performance penalties, especially when it comes to data indexing, because you will effectively have to actually build indexes out of encrypted data. And so you need to decrypt it to actually build those. However, I've never worked with such technology, so I can limit my opinion on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's helpful to understand that basically they're kind of like the same idea of cloud storage. You know, from the standpoint of actually being able to back up everything you have, you know, so like not just like that sense of privacy, but rather the sense of ownership of your own nodes. That is a problem that I've had with not just Notion, but, you know, all the classic ones like Evernote, OneNote. I kind of talk specifically about some apps because I can't remember exactly how they work in terms of exporting things, but I've definitely felt trapped in the past with, for instance, OneNote. That thing is pretty tricky to export everything out. So like, I really like to be able to just migrate if I need to. How important is that to you, or what do you think of general migration, being able to export it all out?
So actually, as you will see from my actual Tana workspace, I'm very strict about structured knowledge. And so, for example, just to give a backstory of myself, I've been not taking since a lot. And when I discovered Rome, which was actually 6 months ago, more or less, because I just was curious, I moved from Rome. I was using Craft, I was using Notion, Heptabase, Reflect, so many applications. And I actually moved data from one to the other. And for me right now, I literally moved every piece of data by hand. The reason being that I care about data consistency and structure. Of course, in this case, I think that Tana here is playing a very, very nice game because they are building a very interesting system. That is, they basically describe a format that is understood by Tana on which you can map over your existing data. And so basically, you can build exporters by using a certain Tana intermediate format. That's basically the idea. So you can, let's say, transpile your knowledge base from one language to the other, let's say. And I think this is very nice of Tana because, of course, community can build exporters completely autonomously, and they can be very nicely integrated because the intermediate format allows you to actually handle a lot of things. For example, I still remember when I was exporting from some apps, they were converting it to Markdown. And of course, when you implement Markdown, for example, the modeling of links in Markdown, it's simply a link, it's an href to a certain resource. And so it's not imported correctly inside of the tool. It's not able to automatically recognize that this is an entity and the link goes to a new entity in the system instead of going, for example, to a relative link that has been generated by the exporting app. And this is, I think, what Tana is doing very well. It's like starting from this Tana intermediate format to actually build up user base. Of course, this will create problems. That is, not everyone can be one-to-one mapped between applications. First of all, because there are different types of ontologies between the applications, and in general, also the semantics are different. But like with a proper parsing, you can try to maximize, of course, this. That's my take on it.
Yeah, no, that's great because you know, I still use Obsidian. That is the one that I still combine with Tana when it comes to like note taking, just because I feel it's a better format for writing at length. So if I want to do a final blog post that I just want to copy paste into my website, I still feel like Obsidian is better at that. But pretty much Tana is like better at everything else. Like, so for me, it replaced my use of Logseq, which might also replace the use of ROM research. So honestly, like I feel Tana makes like ROM research, Logseq, almost every other outliner pretty much obsolete, or at least it heavily replaces it because it's just so much more powerful, right? Like, what do you think of that?
I think that's actually a great thing, and I agree 100% with you. And actually, Tana can very simply adopt a similar like writing style as Obsidian, because if you think about it, we have Craft. Craft is a block-based application. Every time in Craft you write a line, you're actually writing a different block, which in this case can be actually skipped if you basically press Shift-Enter. The idea is that Tana could, for example, switch and create a custom view, let's say, in which basically nodes on the same hierarchy level are just displayed without the outline, like Chrome does. And in this case, you can actually implement the styled nodes, which will basically have headings, dividers. So you can actually map that format. Of course, in this case, then it comes up to actually how you want to export it. And actually, it's also very simple, because if you have a list of nodes, you can actually map them over to equivalent Markdown by mapping each node to a certain line. And so you can actually completely avoid Obsidian if Tana decides to actually implement such a system. which is 100% feasible. Basically treating, let's say, nodes as lines. That's the mapping you could give to the system.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely exciting because right now I still feel limited by Tana in that sense, but it totally sounds possible. Like Logsig already has a bit of like a document view. So like you say, it's just treating nodes in a different way where you can format things. And I also have a CSS hack because Tana works on the browser. There's like these stylus hacks that you can have. And I have one that creates kind of headings, like it's a ghetto solution for now, but at least to format things, like you say, like it's obviously going to be possible. But do you think Tana replaces or could replace every other PKM app, or do you still see how it's a good idea to combine different ones? What is your take on that?
Personally, I'm not a fan of combining. I think that integrations are nice, but create lots of friction. And of course, contracts between applications can break due to the evolution in data schemas and so on. So if I can avoid integrations, I'm more keen on a one-size-fits-all solution. In this case, the thing of Tana is that actually they give you such a flexible model and a set of semantics that you can use, that you can model most workflows actually. And I was able to do it. And I have been, for example, an avid things user, and I was able to completely model things in Tana. I was a avid note taker, and I was using different apps to keep track of links, what I was reading, and then taking notes. I was able to model it entirely in Tana. So actually, I think that if Tana will then in the future convert also and create this kind of document views and styled notes, which will lead actually to people making more long form writing inside of it, then I cannot see like a way to use all the existing tools I use. Of course, we could say that maybe it lacks, let's say, hepta-based visual thingy with diagrams, but that can also be built. So like for me right now, it's the one-size-fits-all solution. And I think that the fact that the team behind it, it's like considering a lot this idea of using the API for many things can also enable you, for example, to perform integrations way more simply. But in my opinion, yeah, I would switch completely from all of the apps. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from, and this is where I've had a lot of conflict because I've always talked about like it's better to have like the right tool for the right job. So like, you know, you use Obsidian for long form writing, you might use something else as an outliner, which in this case is Tana. And I still think it's good, like the more you can bring that together, as long as it's still the best tool for that particular job, you know, that's great.
Exactly.
Like Tana can do tons of things very well, better than the competitors, then it's good to congregate it in one place. But like the reason why I still feel it's good to use other apps, I really agree with what you said, like integrations, like sometimes they're just like a mess and it's just not worth it. Even using Zapier is just not so reliable, like it's a mess. But whenever like there's an app that does kind of something specific that maybe Tana doesn't do, to give you an example, like space repetition, I still use Anki and another one called Mochi. So like, you know, Anki in particular, like it's super powerful, like it's made for that. And, you know, that's where I would recommend still using several apps. But I agree with you that whenever it makes sense, try to bring it together in one place.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. For example, I still use separate apps like I wouldn't do, for example, long form writing in Tana. I just prefer to use either eWriter or a simple note-taking tool or Craft for that. Of course, I'm still like, I finished university, so I'm not doing long form writing anymore. So I will do it at work for RFC proposals and design documents. And in that case, I think for now I will still keep Craft because, of course, Craft's documents are way more stylish, and most importantly, you can share them, which is not what Tana can do. And by share, I'm not meaning inviting people in workspaces. I mean publicly share a certain document, which, considering how Tana semantics work, can be trivial to implement. And in a simple level by simply saying share at this link a specific node and all of its children. So actually you can do that in Tana. I think they are going to do it, not Zoom because they have other things, but actually that's important. Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's very interesting because like publicly being able to share your notes, it just opens up so many possibilities for people that maybe don't know about web development. They might not want to spend the money and time it takes to create a website, but they might want to share some of their nodes, which people do with Obsidian Publish, for instance, which is really cool. Notion has a lot of features for that, just being able to share the link or create a website out of Notion, which is what I actually did. That was my previous website. Now I'm moving to Webflow, which is like a way more powerful, more custom code way of doing things. But yeah, well, I'm excited to see your Tana setup, to see what we can learn from you. Obviously, there's tons to learn. So if you want to share your screen, that'd be amazing, and then just guide me through anything that you find interesting.
That's perfect. So let me share my screen.
Of course.
Okay, so now you should actually see my screen.
Yes.
Do you see it? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So I think that with this conversation, it will be nice if, for example, during our conversation, you ask me some questions about things that, for example, for you, or maybe that you think people might find not clear enough. Because Tana needs some time to be grasped, and so I would prefer so now I will basically share and tell you things. So interrupt me as soon as you have nice questions, because otherwise it's too much stuff, and I don't want to share too much because it can become quite long. Sounds good?
Okay, sounds great, man.
Perfect. So, so basically, let's start to briefly discuss about my Tana. So as I said in the Tana Gems I led, it's very important to understand that Tana has a very different data model from many applications. We have Obsidian, for example, which uses Markdown, which is basically plain text. We have Rome, which uses nodes or blocks and pages. And then Logseq, which uses the same data model. And then we have Tana. Tana brings it to another level, in the sense that everything in Tana is a node. What I mean by that is basically that in Tana, for example, everything will be a child node of your profile, in this case, Riccardo Busetti. The nice thing about this data scheme is that, of course, it allows you to be very flexible and customize every part of the software. For example, here, the child nodes of your root node will be basically displayed into the sidebar, which enables you to customize how you basically display nodes on the left. So in Tana, you have this very nice thing that is the concept of fields. For example, if I open a meeting tag, you can see that I have a set of fields. In this case, for this interview, I assume that you know some basic concepts of Tana, because otherwise it will be a tutorial. And what I did in my Tana is basically, first of all, use a lot of fields. And fields are what differentiates Tana from all the other applications, because it's a way to type the entities in your system. Typically, when you were used to use, for example, Rome, you would basically create, for example, a set of tags, or better, entities like title, date, attendees, context, and link, and you would use them as attributes to a page that is basically a meeting. In Tana, this is different, and the idea in Tana is that we have these fields that are basically domain-restricted entities that can contain nodes, which in this case, for example, as you can see here, I have a title of my meeting, and actually a title is nothing more than a list of nodes, as you can see here. So the powerful thing about the fields, besides the fact that they are super nice to see and also very easy to search, is that they can enable you to actually build structure. And coming from an engineering background, structure for me is very important. And actually understanding how to model the word of interest, which in this case is my life, in Tana, it's very straightforward. The first thing that I struggle with many tools is that I struggle to see where I wanted to put information. I could easily use folders, which is a very lengthy process, and you can't have, for example, multiple folders for a certain node. And for example, I was used to using tags. And of course, tags are very nice to organize, but they can become quite heavy. Let's say you can lose information very quickly if you don't know the combination of tags that lead to a certain information. For this reason, Tana, I think it's great because it allows you to actually tag information, to actually automatically populate that specific node, and then knowing the schema associated with a specific tag, you're able to query the nodes. And the querying part is what you will see is core to my workspace. The idea is that I leverage daily nodes a lot, And each daily node is basically where I will put data. The idea is that I want to put data inside my system as quickly as possible with as much information as possible so that I can surface it via queries later on. What I mean by that is, one of my most common use cases is using Tana as a task manager. So what I did in Tana is create a task tag, which in this case will be basically populated in the following way. I have a simple state that represents the state of my task. I have a date, a due date, a context, which I will explain later what it is, and a set of links together with a description. The idea is that
just one thing before you keep going, just for anyone at home that is kind of lost, you configure, just for anyone else, like you configure the tag, and that's how the fields populate, right? Just like showing that so that people understand. So that way, that's the reason why when you tag something task, it populates all the fields, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
So I should say that. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Don't worry. That was just for context, but keep going.
So basically, this is how I model my task. And so in this case, the idea is that, as you can see, when I tag something, I get a set of auto-completed fields and nodes. Basically, the idea is that in Tana, you can have this idea of super tags, which are basically tags that can contain basically multiple fields or nodes that are automatically copied into that specific node. And this is very powerful because, as I said, it allows you to model structure inside of your system very easily. So the most important thing here is to understand that I have many fields that actually take lots of time to fill out. But Tana is smart enough that it allows me, for example, to automatically use the command palette, which is invoked with command K, and it allows me actually to set the fields which are bounded to a certain domain. What we mean by that? In Tana, if you see here, we have icons representing the fields. Fields can be of different types. And the type of a field is not restricting the domain of possibilities that you have, because actually inside of a field, you can put anything you want. It's just a way to tell Tana how to autocomplete the data insertion for that specific field. In this case, if we talk about a date, Tana will say, hey, if you press space, you can already insert a date. And so it will automatically insert. But as you can see, you can, for example, very easily add a text or a simple node. And so this is very powerful because if you use the command K, for example, let's say that I am in the context, and the context is basically giving me all of the nodes tagged with context. I can just say, as a context, I want, for example, my context of work, and it will be automatically filled in. So the idea of this is that I can actually insert information very quickly. So in my workflow, what I do is, for example, add the to-do, I just say context, and the context is, for example, personal. What Tana will do is basically set this as personal. Together with the planned, as I will show you, I'm able to actually forget about this task specifically in this day, and I'm able to surface the task via queries. So in Tana, for example, you can build queries very easily. Let's say, for example, that I want to build a query into my playground, which is where I test my ontologies. And so I want to say find nodes with tag task as list. And here I want to basically return all of the tasks that are not done and, for example, that are planned for, let's say, tomorrow. So what I will have here is, thanks to this query, I will surface the information that has been added into the daily node. And this is very important because it allows me to actually get the data that I want where I want, thanks to the power of these live queries. In this case, as you can see, the data is actually as a reference. So actually it lives inside of today's node, but it can be actually basically moved, modified inside of a different view. So Tana uses this concept of reference nodes to basically enable you to work on, let's say, shadows of the original node anywhere in your workspace. And you can do it also, for example, by tagging the actual element like this. And the powerful thing is that, for example,
Sorry for interrupting. I was gonna say, like, you know, when you just write these queries, there's pretty much like two ways to kind of filter things, right? Like there's the live query and there's the actual filter toggles. I wanted to know, like, what is your perspective on, like, because I see how beginners might be like, oh, what's a query? That seems like very complicated, but like you showed us, like, it's pretty much writing instructions of what you want to be filtered. But I would like to know, what is the advantage, in your opinion, of writing things inside of the live query versus using those filters that you just popped in there? Yep.
That's a great question. Basically, I can answer you straight away. For example, if I go into my today's note, I have a set of queries in this case, as you can see by milk popped up. And this query is very simple. It says, give me all the tasks that have a planned date, and that's it. And are, of course, not done. The idea is that when you actually perform a query, you need to think that you want that result set entirely. However, when you work with filters, you basically are saying that maybe for this specific use case, I need to filter data to actually be even more specific while searching inside of the live query. That is, what happens, for example, if I want to know the tasks that are due for today? Because right now Tana doesn't offer an operator for that, I actually use filters and simply say plan for today, which in this case, it's basically not shown because I don't have a
There's
task
no existing
for
task.
today. So if I just say today, I will just mention today.
Right.
I will just basically say plan for today. It should actually pop up.
Maybe if you just do the live query and you press done again, I think it refreshes it. Give it a go.
Maybe.
It might be that. If not, I'm not sure.
Yes,
yeah, there it is.
It is. So basically, as you can see here, actually, it's very clearly shown that 7 items has been filtered out.
Right.
Why? They have been filtered out from the original result set of the query, of the original query. So actually, this is a way to actually perform, let's say, bounded searches on the data you have on the query. Because right now, you cannot search inside of a live query. So basically, this is actually the way of searching right now. And it's actually very nice because it allows you to filter it very easily, all of your data.
Yep.
So that's basically the difference.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And well, just regarding that, like, it's very cool how you have organized things by planned, backlog, inbox. In order to have things side by side, can you show us a bit of like how you set up so that you have planned, backlog, inbox?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that, as I say, in Tana, everything is a node. And actually, the beauty about Tana is that nodes are just presented differently. And this kind of presentation is different from data. It's very important because actually it allows Tana to be expanded with different capabilities in the future. And actually Rome pioneered this concept. For example, if you know, they were building Kanban boards with a certain hierarchy of nodes. This is basically what Tana does. And so if we go into the original node here, as you can see here, this is a reference. And the fact that this is a reference is that I want to have the query node, or better, the node that is hosting the queries on its own space, and it's just referenced into the daily node, so that if I modify it here, it will be modified in all of the daily nodes. The idea is that if we actually view this node as a list, we can see that actually the list is nothing more than a set of child nodes that in this case are live query nodes. And so in this case, what I do is use the experimental feature in Tana Labs called tabs, which is basically a way for showing the children of a certain node as tabs. Amazing. The important thing here to know is that this kind of view, or better, this interface, can be actually activated from any node. Let's say that we create, for example, a sample node here, and we go into the sample node. And let's say that I create the child 1, child 2. Basically, the idea is that I can say, Tana, okay, I want a different presentation of these 2 child nodes. And what I do is I basically say, show view options. And they say, show them, for example, as a table, show them as a set of cards, or as tabs. And this is basically how you can do that.
Perfect.
And you can also perform all sorts of filtering as you would do in a normal query. So in this case, it says nothing to filter on because these nodes do not have fields. And this is why fields are so powerful, because it allows basically you to filter information and search for it.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I'm really curious to see, like, within what you were showing us for how you manage tasks, how you actually organize projects. For you, is it better to do it in a field, in a tag, in a reference? I'm really curious because there's so many options for organizing projects, right?
So first of all, what I did is try to model actually how I work with things. The idea of my basically workspace is that I work around areas and projects. This is basically inspired by things, and the idea is that an area is something of my life that I want to dedicate attention to, and actually doesn't have an end and a start date. Whereas a project is belonging to a single area and is something that has a set of tasks, and these tasks will be basically used and done in order to complete the project itself. So for example, in my life, I decided to actually create areas like personal, work, learning, health, home, finance. And you can notice that these things are generally very abstract, very generic, and do not have an end. So projects, on the other hand, actually have an end. And for example, one project that I'm doing right now is actually teaching Tana. And the idea is basically that teaching Tana is a project that in this case, it's to my personal area, because it doesn't have to do with work. It doesn't have to do with learning. It can, but in my case, it's not. And also with health, home, and we can continue like that. So the idea is that, as I said, a project can have an area that is, as you can see here, this is a hashtag. So this is a field that is basically restricted with anything tagged with area, and it can be completed. It's very similar to how things is modeling projects. In this case, the idea is that projects belong to the idea of constant context. Basically, in Tana, I created this abstract concept, which is called context. And the idea of context is that a context is something that basically I'm using as a way to group related things together. That is, when I talk about a task, a meeting, or a note, all of them belong to a certain context, because a task can either be on a project or it can either be on an area, like in things, a meeting, the same thing, and also some notes, because what I tend to do is create notes on the fly. And how do I want to make sure that notes are not forgotten? What I basically do is create the so-called context node, which is basically a node that, as you can see here, will be tagged with context node, and it's nothing more than what? A node that contains a context. So when I want to take a note, I can, for example, say quick note, and the quick note actually belongs to teaching Tana. And so let's say this is a note, and then let's say that I completely forgot this thing. So I added it to my daily note, and then I forgot it. So
sorry, just for context, like for anyone not familiar how the quick add works, is just pretty much that lightning at the very top of the bar, right? Just, and that sends it to today's note. Carry on.
Exactly. And the idea of this quick add is basically that it basically takes a set of nodes, as you can see here, and it will take all of the nodes appended to this field, and basically, or better, text field, and append them to the end of the daily node. So as you can see here, this is a feature that has been designed on top of the data model of Tana without adding anything. Like, it's basically saying, create a temporary set of nodes that will be dumped into the today's node automatically. And this is the power of Tana, because the data model is so flexible that it also allows the team itself to actually build complicated features very easily into the product without actually having to implement very complicated logics themselves. And so this is quite powerful, because you can enables basically the team to iterate very quickly.
So then that sends it to the daily node, right? You were showing us the context. So carry on with the context. That was really cool.
So basically, as you can see here, the quick note is here, and it's contextualized with teaching Tana. So let's say that now 2 weeks pass and I forgot about this note. Actually, this is a problem, and I want to surface this information. And so what I can do, I can use the concept of live queries. So as you can see in my project, which is called Teaching Tana, it will look like magic at first, but basically you can see that I have automatically popping up the quick note.
Yep.
The powerful thing is that all of this, as you can see, we have a divider. This divider is basically how Tana divides the default content of a node with respect to the content that you have to append. And so you can see that these live query nodes are automatically injected by my project tag. And basically the idea is that here I built 3 nodes that are live query nodes that have a special query. The query, it's basically fetching, for example here, all of the tasks that are not done and whose context is parent. So this is something that confused many people when I explained it, but basically the idea of parent is that it will take the node in which, or better, the parent node in which the live query belongs to, and it will substitute parent with the node itself, which basically means that if I run this query inside of teaching Tana, it will basically mean give me all the tasks that are not done and contain as a context teaching Tana. And this is quite powerful because it allows you to use a concept which in programming is known as generic programming, in which you describe behavior of objects through generic placeholders, which in this case relate to types. And this is basically, let's say, a custom type that is based into the system like query, I would say system field for queries. It's not properly a system field because system fields are something else, but it's like a, let's say, a special keyword. That's what it is. And so it allows me to spin up projects very quickly and automatically have the opportunity to actually surface information very, very easily.
Yep.
So that's basically how I organize it.
That's really cool. And like for context of what you were saying of parent, like you say, like that for people might be like very confusing, but like you said, it's pretty much just a quicker way. Instead of having to define like, show me all the tasks for teaching Tana, show me all the tasks for like do groceries, it just pretty much grabs wherever it came from and it just filters by that, right? It's really powerful.
Exactly. And Tana has a lot of these built in. That can vary from use case to use case. So we can use descendants, so we can do tree traversals. That is, we can actually take nodes that are in a specific part of the tree, or let's say the graph. And so actually, this is quite interesting because it allows you to build very complicated queries that automatically populate data based on the context in which they are in.
Right.
Actually, my Tana workspace is very simple, or better, I consider it very simple with respect to how much things you can actually do into Tana. I try to keep it simple simply because I don't want to overdo stuff, and actually it can become difficult to maintain if you increase complexity because it's not a magic tool. So you need to maintain it. It's exactly like software.
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, like, I can also show you, for example, another flow that I modeled into my system. And I think this is quite an interesting flow that I also modeled because I had a call with a friend about my Tana, and he told me that he would like to, for example, model the concept of weekly reviews. Generally, weekly reviews are basically a way to actually look back at your week and actually perform some reflections on it. How did I actually model a weekly review? So let's suppose that I want to do a weekly review for this week. Let's say that it's Sunday when I do it. What I would do is basically create a weekly review node. And basically I will be presented with this set of things. That is the week score, a simple field in which I dump my ideas, and some special nodes here. So the week is very nice because actually, if you think, as I said, Tana is built on top of itself. It's very meta, this definition, and you will understand why is that when you use the product. But actually, for example, daily nodes in Tana are basically implemented in the following way. Tana is just generating daily a node with the following structure. It's a day node that is nested under the week of the year. And if you go, for example, into the week, you can see that week 43 is automatically initialized. In this case, you cannot modify because let's say it's a system node. And in this case, it's automatically tagged as week. So I just reused this tag of week to just say into my weekly review. So give me the possibility to assign to week actually a week that is a node that is automatically generated by Tana. So I don't need to actually create weeks because they are automatically built into Tana. So in this case, I will basically specify the last week of the list, supposing that I do it for every single week. Otherwise, I will have to search for it. I give it a score. In this case, this is a predefined fixed options field. And then I have to write something here. But the beautiful thing is now, when I do a quick review, I care about what I did in the last week.
Right.
And actually, if you think about it, when I use other kind of tools, now it becomes very difficult to go and see all of my data. But if I told you that the concept of my workspace revolves around adding as much information as possible to surface information later, we can just use live queries to automatically build up a view of my week. How do I do that? I created a node which is called week retrospective. And the idea is that this week retrospective is basically a set of queries that will show me the things I wanted to do for the week, the tasks that I completed into the week, the tasks that I didn't complete, and the notes that I wrote during the week. So the beautiful thing about this is that
sorry, let me ask you a question in there. Yeah, sorry for interrupting. I was gonna ask you, like, you know how Tana doesn't really store, at least right now, information on like when was a task done by itself. So is that something that you do manually, you know, in completed tasks, like right there in week retrospective? Yeah, like how do you do that? Done last 7 days.
Basically, in this case, it's very simple, and this implementation actually has some faults. So how it works is basically give me all the tasks that have been done in last 7 days. In this case, done last X days, it's basically a custom operator of Tana, which will basically filter out if the task has been done in the last 7 days. Because basically, if you have a checkbox-based node, it will contain this information. The problem with this implementation is that it will count 7 days from when you do the weekly review. So if I do it now, it will show me the last 7 days, that is including the previous Thursday. What I plan to do when they will release a proper, let's say, implementation is actually try to find a way to link the week and actually give me all of the tasks that have a planned date that is greater or equal than the first node in week and less or equal than the last node in week. This is how I would model the query. And the team is actually working on supporting this kind of queries. So actually not specifically this use case, but actually more generic use case. And so in that case, it will be very, very much useful. So in this case, I basically, let's say, restrict myself to doing it very strictly on Sunday because of this limitation.
So that way, like that filter is only relevant if it's the latest weekly review, right? So that means that if you go to week, I don't know, 40, then that view is not perfectly accurate, right? Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Exactly. If I go, for example, to 2 weeks ago, I will get the tasks done from the day in which I'm writing the note, like the day in which I'm in, because the query will take the today's date, basically. So of course, this is very much skewed. But for my kind of use case right now, it's not that big of a deal. So that's basically what I do.
Got you.
One very cool thing is that because I modeled everything inside of Tana, I also have the weekly review rituals, which is basically a way for me to go through my Matter inbox, which is the application I use to basically highlight articles. My Matter inbox is basically every time I read an article, because Matter doesn't have the integration with Tana, I just highlight, put it into the Matter inbox, and every Sunday I will take every article and put it inside of Tana with the highlights, and then write some thoughts about these highlights. So I can check this out. Then I move to Spotlights, and Spotlights is a concept that I have introduced in my workspace lately. And the idea of Spotlights is that it will give me everything into my workspace that is tagged with Spotlight. And this is basically the simplest possible way in which you can build favorites in Tana. So I basically built favorites with a fancier name for myself. And the idea of Spotlights is that I put their information that for me has lots of relevance. And what I do is basically, let's say that, for example, I forgot to leave one thing into the spotlights. I will just go here and press the X to remove the tag, and the information will be automatically removed. As you can see here, this is a great example to show how you can multiple tag nodes. So here I have 2 tags. And this is basically, I think, a great thing about Tana, that I was able to model the idea of favorites without them creating the concept of favorites, because they don't need to do that.
Right.
And this is flexible, very important, right? Because
sorry,
for example,
I was gonna say, Spotlight, do you use it just for tasks or for anything that you want to revisit at the end of the week? Right. So it's just favorites for anything. Amazing.
Let's say, for example, that I'm talking with a person, and this person says something very interesting. Let's say that he gives me like the formula of success. I will write it down, and for example, I forget to write it as a note, like this. I will write it down, and let's say that I don't, for now in my mind, I don't know like if this information is a note or a task or something. I will just tag it as Spotlight, and I'm done. Amazing. Information captured. Spotlight will be always added as a reference live query node into my today's node. So every day I can just open it and say, oh, I was speaking with a certain person about that. So what happens here? Because this node is actually created to a today's node, let's say that now I will go to like the 30th of October. I will just go here and say, oh, formula of success. Looks interesting. Let's see. It was created in 25th of October. Then I go back and I will see the history of things that I added. And I say, oh, I had a YouTube interview with Santi. Maybe with Santi, we discussed about the formula of success. Right. And so this is how you basically discover information with Tana.
Beautiful. And the formula of success is pretty much use Tana, right?
Exactly. I would say so.
Pretty much.
One other thing that is strictly connected with tags is that I don't know if you saw that actually this node is automatically like the title is created automatically.
From
what
fields.
I do is that
Beautiful.
Tana has a feature. Exactly. It basically allows you to actually build the title from the fields, so that here every weekly review will be automatically initialized with weekly review of field week. And this is great because it allows me to actually give structure even to how notes are written. That is, as you can see here, I have an interview on today with Santi Younger. So basically here you can see that this is, I cannot modify it. So basically with this system, I want to make sure that data is as consistent as possible. And this is crazy good. I cannot stress this enough, because of course, what you can do is that search for that data. And so you're basically creating this concept of auto-completion, both at the children level, but also at the node level itself. And this is, of course, great, because what I can do is basically use the keyword, let's say with, to actually automatically give me all the meetings with a certain person.
Wow.
And of course,
really cool.
This is crazy.
And you can do a live query, right? Searching for text.
Exactly.
All right, so if you made it this far, I know you resonated with this app. I know you feel it's the right tool for you. So if you want to learn it properly, do check out my Tana course, where I walk you through the fundamentals with very concise videos that are gonna help you understand this app from the inside out, so that you can develop the systems that you've been dreaming of. If that sounds cool, do check out the link in the description. This also helped me keep a roof over this video so that I can keep making videos like this if this is something that you found valuable. Now, with that said, this video that you're watching right now was the end of part 1. Part 2 will be coming out very soon, where we talk with Riccardo about the future of Tana, things such as mobile apps, pricing, how we feel those things will change over time, how Tana competes against Rome, Notion, as well as some really cool pro tips by Riccardo that you're not gonna want to miss. So once part 2 is ready, you'll find links here and in the description. And with that said, I hope to see you there. Do check out my course. Have a nice day and be kind to yourself, or something like that. I think that's Ellen DeGeneres. I don't know what I'm saying. Bye. Yep, Ellen DeGeneres says, be kind to one another as an outro. I don't know why that came to mind. That's super weird, but I'll stick with that. So see you later. Bye.